I'm glad to see not too many red and tired eyes this morning. Before we start, I have a couple of housekeeping announcements. If you were to check out today and you vacated your room, please, and you still have your key on you, please give your key to Carol at the back. Everybody moves. This is good. Did we all do the right thing, or we haven't even vacated our room yet? If you need to vacate your room, please go do that right now, because it needs to be done by 9:30. I also have some merchandise. So this is the compendium. It now includes all of the human behaviour and evacuation papers from Interflam from the years 1998 to 2013, and also includes all the human behaviour in fire symposium papers up until now. So if you're interested in this, please, at the registration, where you registered, please talk to the staff members there, and I'm told that it's approximately £40, but please don't quote me on that. So, to kick off this morning, we have Rodrigo Machado Tavares. Please. My funny accent. Sort of Australian, sort of something else. So Rodrigo is a fire safety engineer. He has a PhD in evacuation modelling combined with optimisation techniques from the University of Greenwich in the UK. And he has experience in both academia and commercial fields in Brazil and the United Kingdom. And he is currently working for CH2M. So this morning, please welcome Rodrigo as he is presenting on uncertainties in evacuation modelling for the current flaws and future improvements.
Good morning, everyone. I'll try to wake you guys up. So that's the title of our talk, myself and Dr. Evacuation. And oops, that's not nice. So first of all, I'd like to say a big thanks to CH2M, which is supporting us to be here, and Dr. Mike Deave, and also Dr. Peter Wright, and also my colleague Amy Boyer for the support, and also Professor Bundi from Dr. Evacuation. Okay, that's the contents of the talk today. So we're going to give an introduction about the work, why we are here, and then a classification of these uncertainties that we find in evacuation modeling, and then show some methods that we can assess some of these uncertainties, and then some discussion. Before talk about that, we can also talk about the background and the justification of this work, why we decided to make this study, to initiate. Talk with this Evacuation a few months ago, last year, we have been finding that there is this issue, which is very important, that currently in evacuation modeling, different from CFD modeling, for example, we have uncertainties that they are not classified, they are not identified, and but they exist, and we should, try to spot them and also classify, if it's the case, and once this is understood, try to address. So that's basically the aim of this work here, is basically to identify these uncertainties, classify them, and starting to propose methods that can address. So that's basically what we have. Okay. It's a philosophical approach. I always like to show that, to remind ourselves that, model is not reality. So, and quite often I can hear, either in the academia sometimes and also in the practical commercial field, people saying, oh, this model is 100% accurate. And that's wrong, I mean, otherwise it's going to be reality. So, a model is an attempt to represent reality. So, we always have this delta, this gap between reality, or whatever this means, what's reality, and the model. So, that's a fact. So, actually, this discrepancy between reality and model, that's what we are investigating here. Some of the factors actually, because we have also errors, but we're not going to cover that. So we are based, focus on uncertainties. So we have main factors that can, we call noises. So we have these noises, and can be for numerical solutions, which are not accurate. Also our understanding about the problem itself. So all of these are noises, and we are covering the uncertainties. Okay, so basically, in general, we can see this diagram that shows us the modeling process in a general perspective. So, so we are going to address some of these uncertainties in each step and classify them. So, put into context to our case, we have defined these. Okay, so we have this same modeling process, evacuation modeling process, and we start to classify these uncertainties for each step, as you can see here. So it doesn't mean that that's the final classification. That's a proposition, and all of you here are more than welcome to propose and carry on this study, and that's the aim of this paper, is to bring this attention and hopefully to bring some light to this important issue. So that's basically, you can read more the paper, and I will concentrate this presentation to this part here and propose or present a technique that can help to assess these uncertainties. I hope my elocution is good. Is that okay? Try to speak much better. Okay, so classification of uncertainties. So we are classifying all these uncertainties, and the first one that we were saying is to do with the scenarios and inputs. That's very fundamental. That's paramount, and that's very critical, because depending on what you insert in your model, you can, that's what we call this process, rubbish in, rubbish out. So it's very fundamental. Understand the problem, to insert the right data, and then you can actually model what you want to model. And it's a very simple thing, but it's very fundamental. It's very important to always remind us. It's funny because my first job in the UK, I can say that, was for redoing a modeling from a previous colleague that actually he's done the model right, but he got the data wrong. So he was actually modeling something else. And that's very important. I got the job, which was good. So we can make a comparison, that analogy. In statistics, we have, let's say, that's the real system here, curve A, and we try to approximate it with some data. So basically, if you don't get the right data, we can, we can increase this gap here. So that's why it's fundamental. Even if you use the right equation, the right responsive phase model or whatever, but it will be based on a very wrong system. So, okay, so I'm gonna speed up with that. So definition of the relevant scenarios, which is also fundamental. So basically, it's to understand all these parameters that comes from these relations, very basic. The relation between the built environment and the people itself, the built environment and the external stimuli, the fire, for example. Also, the built environment and the structure, the structure itself, and also the built-in occupants between themselves, human behavior. So these are fundamental and very important as well. Okay, so I'm gonna just mention about this measurement uncertainty. Basically, this refers to the experimental measurement itself, right? In evacuation modeling, this uncertainty is associated with instrument uncertainty of the data collected for model development and calibration. So basically, this has been discussed here in previous presentations. That's very important as well. So it can bring uncertainty to the stage. We also have the model input uncertainty, and we have this in 3 levels, as we can categorize. So you have the data collector, so the person or the team which is collect data might insert uncertainty as well in this data. You also have the model developer. You might, include uncertainty in the model. For example, some models sometimes have parameters that you cannot change, right? And the user won't be able to change, and that's also, not ideal. And you have the user level, which also can increase this uncertainty. So is the user, using properly the model? Is the user adapting the model into the reality? So all of this needs to be considered, classified, understood, and addressed. And we also have the uncertainties associated with the models themselves. And that's a big issue. We have over, correct if I'm wrong, like over 60, maybe 60 evaluation models. And it's the black box of these models. Do we know how they work? And more specifically, do the client or the user know that? Do they have to know? And I'm paying so expensive for this model, so it should work fine. So the black box is fundamental, and I'm not going to be mentioning, for example, some algorithm, but there are some mathematical assumptions which are not really appropriate for modeling people, and they have been used for that. So and then increase the uncertainty as well, that gap. And also the uncertainty is to do with the output, or as Enrico mentioned, is the behavioral uncertainty. So he has been working on that, initiate this kind of work, and basically is how we analyze the outputs, so also can increase as well the uncertainty. I'm always uncertain about the time. Is that okay? So yeah, anyway, so I will focus then on these uncertainties here, right? The scenarios and inputs. Basically, if you are familiar with CFD modeling, they call this kind of uncertainties as input uncertainties. So it's basically the same for us. What we are proposing in this study, actually, is to use, for example, concepts such as the DOE techniques, design for experiments, to assess and address these issues. DOE techniques, for those which are not familiar with, is a very well-known approach used in operational research. And we are going to discuss briefly about them. That's one of our proposals to address these uncertainties. And then we ask, why is that? And again, that's my statement, and I challenge you, to disagree with me. Hopefully not, but yeah, as well. So the way we are currently dealing with the input uncertainties probably increases even more the significance of these uncertainties. So, and I put an example, Monte Carlo, and I'll explain why. I'm sure that most of us, we have heard about Monte Carlo. Oh, for many applications, you can just use Monte Carlo here, Monte Carlo there, but to really understand why is that, is this really an effective approach? So I think it's important to have this in mind. So I will go back to this point, but I just want to mention for those which are not familiar with this context. In optimization technique, optimization theory, a classical concept, you have your objective function, you have some design variables. So basically, that's your response, and you have factors or variables which will impact this response. An example that we have, worked before is to understand, for example, the evacuation time as our objective function, our response, and see which kind of variables can influence its value. For example, the escape door width, or maybe the escape door location, the floor area, number of people, and then we can even go into more complicated approach, people's behavior, how familiar they are, and things like that. So these influence the response of your evacuation time. So just an analogy. So basically, in the classical optimization theory, that's what we do. We specify the problem. So what's my problem? What's my function? What's influencing the value of this function? So what are my design variables? They should be independent, and how they will impact that response. And then we use the DOE techniques to build our design space. In other words, trying to put into context to our reality of evacuation modeling, basically we are proposing to use these techniques to define design points, which, in other words, will be the scenarios where we want to work, we want to simulate the relevant ones, ideally. So, but going back, that's why you do your simulation tool, to simulate, in our case, evacuation modeling. So you have your response parameters, you have your response-based modeling, you try to find the best function or equation for this response, and then you optimize. So in summary, let's say if you want to find your global minima, so after that whole process, use your technique and then you can find. So just an example. Okay, so going back to what I was saying before, let's imagine, hypothetically, this design space. So the design space, this 3D dimension, let's say I have design variable 1 and 2, so their combination here will generate a value for the response. So we can visualize, even hypothetically, that ideally, if I want to get, let's say, I should have points that should cover this design space, ideally. Makes sense. That's the point. What happens with Monte Carlo, for example? Okay. Is that Monte Carlo does not give me the certainty that I will pick up design points along the design space. It's a sampling technique, and maybe in the first sample, I just get this region here. So basically, I will do my evacuation modeling, thinking that I'm doing for this whole design space, but doing for this. And that's why they propose, so we should be doing more than one run. So we can do 10. So maybe if you do 10 runs, you might cover, but maybe not. So it's a stochastic approach. So that's what I would like to bring attention to that Monte Carlo is not a bad technique, but it's not the only one, and it's not accurate, because it's based on a stochastic approach. So that's basically, that's what we are looking at. So to minimize this, this uncertainty generated in the very beginning. So what you're proposing in this talk is basically, there are some alternative approaches to assess these uncertainties, and one of them is to try to combine with DOE techniques for this issue. So basically, that's the paper, that's the work. You can read more about the paper, you can ask more, but the issue is I think we need to identify these uncertainties and classify them, understand them, and once this is start to be done, also to propose techniques or methods to assess and address these uncertainties. Well, less is more, and I think I will leave here. I'm open for questions here or afterwards, whenever it's suitable. And I'm quite glad that usually I tend to talk a lot and not follow the time, so yeah, so I have some spare time, so which is an achievement. So more questions you can send an email to myself and also Eiko, and we are happy to listen for criticism and ideas, and that's it, of course.